Christianity and sometimes how it's presented, a lot of times we don't always think about how to present material in such a way that's applicable. How can you use it? And it's a lot of times it's based on just the do this, do that, don't do this type things in Scripture, and all those things are important. But what is it that you're supposed to do with it? One of the things I've been teaching my kids and trying to get across to them is in order to learn something, you got to figure out how to do something with it. What are you going to do with the material that you've been given? Because if we don't know what to do with it, it just kind of floats away. So we want to look at the Sermon on the Mount. We're just going to kind of overview some of the things on this Matthews 5, 6, and 7, and see what Jesus says and how to apply these things to our lives. And we're going to look at this as the title lesson is called Challenges That Christians Face. And it's looking at things from an internal perspective versus an external perspective. We think about probably the number one problem that Christians face is selfishness. All sins are based on a selfish desire. They're all based on what I want as opposed to what Jesus wants, or as opposed to what somebody else needs. They're based on me. So that's looking at things from an internal perspective. Hold your finger at Matthew 5 and look at James chapter 3, verse 16. James makes mention of this in his writing. James chapter 3:16, he says, "For where envy and selfishness self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there." So James is just simply saying, if there's confusion going on, if there's problems going on, envy, whatever it is, it's generally caused because of selfishness, or he titles it self-seeking. But we have this problem that I want to do, and a lot of times we do what we want to do regardless of what God wants us to do. So, but that would be the number one problem that you can look at. And if you can figure out how to solve the selfish problem, then a lot of the other problems will go away. The other problem that Christians face is finding our identity. You think about the term identity and how it's used in our context of our world today. People are very confused about who they are. Are you male? Are you female? Are you what? What are you? But Christians kind of face the same problems as well. Are we physical people or are we spiritual people? We're physical because God gave us a physical body. He gave us this tent to live in. But how do we look at life? Do we look at life in a everything's physical, everything's based on what I can see, smell, taste, touch, all those physical things? Or do we look at things in a perspective of this is how it's the spiritual nature of it? And you can kind of ask yourself the question, do I have a soul? Well, it depends on how you answer that is whether or not you might be thinking things are in a physical realm or in the spiritual realm. If you say, yes, I have a soul, that could relate that you're thinking on a physical standpoint. But if you say, no, I am a soul, that looks at things from a little bit different perspective, because we're a soul living inside a physical body. So, but our identity is something that we have a lot of times have a trouble really, really getting a hold of. And if we can understand what our true identity is, are we physical or spiritual? If we can figure out the selfishness problem, if we can figure out the spiritual problem, then a lot of the things that we deal with are going to be a lot easier. And that's kind of what Jesus is getting, the gist of what he's getting in the Sermon on the Mount. And he's looking at this particular topics he's throwing in. He's showing some things in an internal versus an external, physical versus spiritual mindset. And he begins the Sermon on the Mount with Beatitudes. And we're not going to read through them, but this is how he starts the sermon off. He's looking, if you want to be happy, this is all you got to do right here. And he's blessed are, and he lists all those things that will make you happy. And that's kind of where he goes and starts out. And these are the things that you have to get in your mind, to get in your life, if you want to really be happy. So kind of gearing the thoughts and the mindset towards a more of a spiritual mindset. And then look at verse 17. He makes kind of a profound statement there that kind of like someone might be looking and just kind of halfway listening to him. And this is one of the things that the Jews would have heard this, and it would have got their attention, and they would have started looking at him. He says, "Do not think that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." And why would that grab their attention? Because everything that they are doing is based on the law and the prophets. That's their whole world. And Jesus is telling them, I'm not coming to destroy that, but I'm coming to make it work better for you. That's kind of the mind that he's trying to get them to look. It's one of those things where someone might say to you, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but, that's kind of what he's trying to say to them. You're doing things wrong is what he's fixing to tell them, because they thought that they had this all figured out. He's just doing this to try to get their attention. Again, he's trying to make it to work better for them. Again, that's a profound statement. And look at verse 20. Scroll down just a little bit. "For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." Again, another very, very profound statement that just came out of Jesus' mouth. And all those people who are listening to him, their ears, again, they're perked up and they're trying to figure out, what is he talking about? Why would he say something like this? Because if you're a Jew in that time frame, the people that you know of would be the most religious people in the world, who you kind of model yourself after would be the Pharisees. But Jesus is trying to get them to think that internal versus external. When you look at it and what you know about the Pharisees, you know their religion is very externally based. It's all based on what I see, what I can show you with the phylacteries and the scriptures that they read and all the things that they do. It's all a show. It's all kind of just there for people to say, that's a great guy. If anybody's going to be in heaven, it's going to be that one. That's kind of what their mindset was. But Jesus is trying to get people to think beyond that, and he's putting this mindset. Are you going to be a religious person, the external, or if you listen to me, I can make you be a righteous person? There's difference in religious and righteousness. So, again, that struggle between the two, they kind of are played out. They manifest themselves in four different ways throughout the Sermon on the Mount. This again, the struggle between religious versus righteous. Again, there's a lot of people who are very religious people in this world, but when you look at the population, there's very few who are righteous, and there's it's this problem. It's this thing that people are weighing back and forth between themselves, trying to get it right. But we're going to look at the four different ways that Jesus presents this argument in the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to look at it from a standpoint of legalism. We're going to look at it through a standpoint of materialism. We're going to look at it from a standpoint of egotism. And then we're going to look at it from the standpoint of criticism. So the isms there to maybe kind of help you get those kind of stuck in there and looking how Jesus is trying to present this material. But the idea of legalism, that's just one of those words that means law. There's law. It's a good thing to have law because it kind of gives you guidelines of where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to do, and they're for your protection. You don't want to go too far because you don't want to break the law. We can put that in the perspective of our government. There's laws set up so that we don't get hurt, or if we stay within the boundaries of the laws, we're not going to be in trouble. So we get that. Sometimes people use the term legalism to justify what they want to do. Well, you're just a legalist, so therefore, and it's kind of one of the throwing this idea out there that I'm not going to follow a law. You can talk to people sometimes, and they'll say, "Well, we're not under law anymore." That's kind of the idea that they're trying to get across there. Or you're a legalist, meaning you're trying to bind things on them that they don't want to have to do. But Jesus is making this statement here, and we're going to kind of look through some of the verses here. Scroll down. We don't have an iPad. It's not scroll. Look at verse 21, and we're going to kind of start there and see how Jesus makes this argument between internals versus externals and how they play out in the legal definitions of things. So verses 21 through 25. You have heard that it was said of those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Agree with your adversary quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you over to the judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Now, whenever you start looking at that little section there, he makes this general statement. This is one of the 10 Commandments: you shall not murder. Now, if I asked in the audience to raise their hand, how many of you guys have murdered somebody? Probably nobody. Eli's worked with people, I'm sure, that have. But it's not something we generally deal with in the church. It's just not something that's there. But what does he go beyond? The murder is an external aspect of something else. Murder is not something you just go do. It's a process. It's something that comes from an internal struggle. And that internal struggle Jesus is getting you to see is but if anybody hates his brother or is angry with his brother for no cause, he's putting the idea of hatred out there. Now, but if I ask you again the same question, has anybody ever been angry without a cause? Or have we ever hated somebody? Again, we might think probably not, but at school, again, I do a lot of references to school because that's my world, but you hear people call each other idiots all the time. It's just real hateful to each other. You hear the word fag thrown around. Any kind of racial slur that you can throw in there. Those types of things. Those are being angry with somebody without a cause. If we can look at things and label people based on what we see externally, that's what Jesus is talking about here. That's what he goes on to say. Whoever says to his brother Raca shall be in danger of the council. That's calling somebody a fool. So what we have to think about is we don't need to belittle somebody, or we don't want to do things to people and put them in this little category that they're different than us or we're better than they are because they're whatever it is that they are. Because in the big picture, every human being on the earth has a soul. And we're not any better than they are, and they're not any better than we are. Their soul is in need of salvation just like our soul is. You think about people in the denominational world, or people that are homosexual, or people who are living a life of sin. Those people, we need to get in our minds, those people are not the enemy. Those people are not people that are against us in a way that we should fight back like an enemy type situation. Those people are living in a situation where they're being deceived by the real enemy. And the real enemy is the devil. He's gotten people in our country to believe that it's okay to have a relationship with someone of the same sex. He's done a very good job of making that an okay thing. He's made a very good job of making people think that it's okay to be a member of whatever denomination that you want to be a part of. And he's made this whole blanket out there that are out there that he's just kind of confusing people. So we have to make sure that we're doing a good job to try to sort through his lies and help people to come through his lies. And again, if the devil causes us or gets us to hate somebody that's different than we are, we're not any better than they are. And that's where Jesus is headed with this. And if I label somebody, then my righteousness is not really righteous. I may be religious, but I'm not living a righteous life if I have that attitude. Okay, look at verse 27 through 32. He goes on a little further. You have heard it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Again, think about what he's talking about. Another one of those 10 commandments. Commit adultery versus lust. Adultery, again, is an external thing that happens because of an internal problem. We kind of, again, the devil has done a very good job of convincing us that there's a technical, what you call technical purity, meaning if I'm not wearing clothes that are at whatever line the world has drawn, then I'm okay. Or if I'm not showing, whatever, then I'm okay. But modesty is not just a line on your body. Modesty is a mindset. Modesty is a heart issue. If we have the right type of mindset and the right type of heart, then we're not going to want to wear things that are immodest. And it's not matter where the line is. Because if you think back historically, the line used to be way down here. So it's kind of inched its way up over the years. So we can't let that line, that technical purity, if you will, be what we go by. Again, it's a thing that's all starts up here. Who's committed adultery? That's I don't know, but who's lusted? I mean, you could probably answer that question in your mind. Well, yes, I have at times. I try really hard. I struggle with that. We see these things all over the place. But again, it's an internal versus an external. But again, the devil has done a very good job getting people to believe as long as I don't commit adultery, I'm okay. If I don't go all the way on my date with my boyfriend, I'm all right. But where does the line start? Well, lust starts early. I mean, lust is a very early process. It's if you don't have that lust in your mind, then you're not going to go too far. You're not going to go to get as close as I can without violating anything. I mean, you think about the idea of lust in our society. We have this mindset, and I don't know if it's as much as an adult, but again, with kids, I can look, but I cannot, but not touch. That's kind of where kids are. Kids sometimes they touch no matter what, and you don't want them to. But that's the prevalent mindset among. I'm sure it's among people too. Think about the internet. Over 800,000 porn sites you can reach within 2 clicks of a mouse. Click, click, you're there. People do it all the time. You ever read those romance novels that are really, really filthy? That's one of the things that I had a hard time understanding growing up. Why was it okay to read that, but not okay to watch this? It's the same thing. It causes in your mind to go places that you don't need to go. Watching things on TV that really we shouldn't watch. Maybe they're not completely nude, or they're not going all the way, or they shut it off before. But that thing causes our minds to lust over things. Anything that changes our thoughts to go beyond what Christ wants is not a good thing. Music videos, the list you can go on and on and on. Again, purity is a state of mind. We don't have to. If we can get that in our mind that it is a state of mind, then we don't ever have to worry. Is it too short? Is it too revealing? Is it too tight? Is it whatever? Then we're going to do the things that we're going to do because our mind is right, and it's not for us to look at it from a physical standpoint. So the internal is it's all here. External, we look at it from that little line that's been set in there. And Jesus makes the statement in verse 38. You have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right hand or right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you, take away your tunic and give him your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow, you do not turn away. Again, he's bringing out another internal versus external there. The intent of the law here, don't eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. He's trying to get people to realize that the law was, you don't want to go too far with how much you want to punish somebody. Again, that was the intent, to keep people from going too far. But the Jews had this thing where they wouldn't let things go. They just wanted to keep on and keep on and keep on. And he makes the illustration here with a cloak and a cloak and the distance here. If someone asks you for a cloak, give him your cloak and then give him something else. And then he goes on in verse 43 and talks about you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. So, again, He's showing internal versus external. You know, our families, for the most part, we can love them, and it's not a big deal. Our neighbors that we like, it's really easy to love. Those kids at school sitting in my classroom in that fourth period class, they're easy to love. But the ones sitting in some of those other classes, they're a little harder to love, you know. But those are the ones that we really have to work on. And Jesus is telling us if we want to be a righteous person, we've got to love those just as much as we love those. And he's making that correlation there. In the way we interact with people, he's making that drawing those parallels, making it real. Again, the way that we interact with people shouldn't be determined on how they interact with us. If someone is very mad and, you know, throwing stuff at us and saying all these things to us, going ready to fight us, Jesus didn't say, just go and punch them in the nose and be done with it, which is the prevailing attitude of a lot of people. He's telling us, don't be reactive to them. Find some way to diffuse the situation and love them and treat them in a way that's a good thing, in a good way. It changes the way we interact with people. Again, when we realize that Jesus wants us to do these things and we're spiritual in nature, then it changes the way that we look at things and how we interact with people. We're not going to want to go sue somebody. We're not going to want to go fight somebody. We're not going to want to say bad things to people. We're not going to want to, we're going to see people as another spiritual person, just like we are. And again, if we have that spiritual identity, it will change the way that you live and the way that you do and how you interact with people. So that's the legalism argument that he's looking at. Those laws that are put out there, but he's going beyond the law, get to the heart of the matter. In chapter 6, he talks about the egotism aspect of all of how we interact with people, the internal versus the external argument. Go to verse 6. He starts this, we'll back up to verse 5, because he's starting this talk and discussion about praying. He says, and when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, and that they may be seen by men. Surely I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in secret place. Your Father who sees in the secret will reward you openly. And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they will be heard by their many words. Therefore, do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask them. And then he goes on and gives the model prayer. But he's giving a very profound statement, because their minds, they're looking at the Pharisees. That's how it's supposed to be done. If I want to be right with God, I need to be just like them. And he says, no, that's not it. Because what they're doing this so that you can look at them and you can say, whoa, they're righteous people. But that's an external argument. And then he says, but when you pray, praying is what he wants us to do. Don't do it so people will walk up to you and pat you on the back and say, that was a really good prayer. And there's nothing wrong with someone saying that to you, but that's not our motive. That shouldn't be what we are looking for somebody to do whenever we do say a prayer. Okay, go down to verse 16. Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites, with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting. But to your Father who is in the secret place, your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Now, something that we probably don't do a whole lot of is fasting. But you look back historically, it's something that they did in just about every culture for whatever reason, and it serves a purpose. But what the Jews would do, what the Pharisees would do, they would kind of paint their faces out. They would kind of wash makeup out, if you will. You've seen people walk around, their makeup looks all washed out. That's what they would do. They would put some stuff on their cheeks and make it look like their cheeks have hollowed out, and make it look like they hadn't had food in years or weeks or whatever. And that's what they would do. So people will go up to them and say, "Man, you look hungry. Are you fasting this week?" I knew you were. I knew you were. It's good for you to do that. I'm proud of you. That's what they were looking for. That's not what Jesus says. Now he does make the argument. Fasting does serve a purpose. Fasting, when we think of fasting, it's usually associated with food. But think about it. If you replace anything that you do on a normal basis and you replace it with prayer and meditation and reflection, you're fasting. It's the same idea. You're putting something that's important to you on the back burner so you can focus on God for a little while, and that's fasting. And God says it's a good thing. He says it's a really good thing because it gets us to refocus. It gets us to start thinking, hey, I can live without these things, but I can't live without God. But when we do those things, don't walk around and say, man, I gave up my PS4 for a week. I don't play PS4, so it wouldn't matter to me. But, I put my car in the shop and I ended up driving top down. I'm not going to drive that for a while. Whatever it is that's important to you. If you put that aside for a while and focus on God, then you're fasting. But they're to be done in service to God. Pray, teach, prayer, leading, singing, anything that we do in the public service. Again, you don't want to do that for praise of men. You don't want to be people just you don't want your motive to be, hey, he did a good job. So the egotism that Jesus is saying, watch out for. You don't want to be an egotist. You're not really the important one here. It's God who's the important one. So he's looked at the internal versus the external and egotism. The external would be, look at me. The internal would be, I don't need anybody to know what I'm doing. Now he moves on to materialism. Now look at verse 19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will be your heart, or there your heart will be also. You think about game shows, and I don't know, you younger people probably don't watch game shows, but back in my day, I grew up watching game shows. Price is Right, Let's Make a Deal, but all those things are on there. But the idea of let's make a deal, you had 3 doors, and say your first door, you're standing there, and the first door is door number 1. You have this, and he goes and opens it up for you, and in this door you have a brand new car, you have the keys to a new house. If you don't take it right now, it's gone forever. Door number 2, your other choice is you have a righteous soul that will live forever in heaven. What are you going to choose? A lot of times we choose door number 1 because that's something I can grab hold of and I can feel it, and it's right now, and I want that car, and I want that nice house. That's what we choose a lot of times. Instead of really thinking about, if that stuff goes away, the only thing that really matters is, am I a righteous person? Am I going to go to heaven when I die? The stuff on this earth is been given to us to use, but it's really worthless considering the whole scheme of the matter. And if we put all our eggs in door number 1's basket, by the time judgment rolls around, we're going to be wishing the eggs were in this basket instead of that basket. And that's what Jesus is getting out here. The internal versus the external. The external is the car and the house and the boat and all that stuff. The internal is the righteous soul that we need to have, laying up for ourselves treasures in heaven. Verse 20. No one can serve 2 masters, for he will either hate the one or love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Think about, again, he's making all these very profound statements that they just don't understand, because they thought too, part of the things that they were thinking, the way that you knew you were blessed by God is if you were a wealthy person. If you had money, God was showering you with riches. That's kind of how they looked at it. But again, our riches should be used to serve others, not to be hoarded up and do that, because he makes that statement, you can't serve God and mammon. The idea of mammon being money, that's stuff. He's telling us that life is not about stuff. Life is about serving God. And you can put it into the perspective of like this. How do you view your money? If you're someone who makes $30,000 a year and you live on $25,000 a year, you're a wealthy person because you've got money to spare. You're not overspending. Your mind is not focused on the material. But if you make $190,000 a year and you live off $200,000 a year, you're struggling. It's like that mindset of everything has to be based on what I can buy and buy and buy, and I've got more debt than I have sense. But it's a perspective. You feel swamped and underwater, and that way that starts controlling our lives. We've got to do everything we can to get out of debt. So we work more, and we start throwing money more, and then we spend more, and it's just a never-ending cycle. If we do that, then we're serving mammon instead of serving God. Again, we also think about those things, and how do I use my blessings, or how can I use my blessings? We're all blessed with various and sundry things, but God has given us those things to use for Him. Then verses 25 through 34, he just kind of lays out some more information. So let's skip down to chapter 7. The fourth thing that we're going to look at, internal versus external, is criticism. Now, there's a couple of passages in the Bible that if nobody knows anything about the Bible, one of them is John 3:16 and the other one's Matthew chapter 7. People can quote this very, very quickly. It says, "Judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look at the plank that is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." He's talking about judging, of course, but what standard do we use to judge? I mean, everybody judges, but people will take that first verse and they'll stop there and they'll just say, "You can't judge me." But we make those judgments all the time. It's just a standard, You go down down the street down here at 80 miles an hour, the police are going to stop you because they've made a judgment, right? The law says you can't go 80 miles an hour, so they're going to make that judgment. So do you think you could get away with telling the officer, "You can't judge me"? It doesn't work that way. He's talking about how are you judging people? What is it that you're looking at? Again, the internal versus the external. The external would be, I see all of your faults and all of your mistakes, and I'm going to help you get through your stuff, but without looking at me first. If I look at myself and I see the problem that I have, I'm minimizing my sins and I'm maximizing your sins. It should be the other way around. Jesus says you maximize yours. Fix yours first, and then you can go and realize it and help other people get through theirs. We got to make sure that we're not overblowing somebody else's problems. And that's one of those things that is, for a lot of people, it's really tough to do because people don't want to say, I was wrong, or I'm doing this wrong. But again, we can become very critical of just irrelevant things that don't really matter. We nitpick and nag each other to death a lot of times. And that's what Jesus said. Don't do that. When we compare ourselves to each other, and my sin versus your sin, and that's where we get in trouble. But when we start comparing ourselves to the one who said the message, not any of us any better than the rest of us. And my sins, if I don't repent of them, will get me to hell just as quick as your sins will get you to hell if you don't repent of yours. And that's where Jesus is going with this argument. You got to stop looking at the internal versus the external. Stop focusing on the external and really start focusing on the internal aspects of these. Then you can apply these principles to your life, and then you got it. Then he concludes the lesson in verses 24 through 27. He says, "Therefore, whoever hears the sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew, beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these things of mine and does not do them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." He says, if you've just listened to this lesson, if you listen to me talk about these things, and we've talked about internals versus externals, all those laws that you want to keep, but if you don't know the spirit of the law, all that money that you want to pile up, but you don't really realize where the blessings come from. You're judging people. You're all about me. But if you hear these things and you make these changes in your life, you're the wise man. We teach our kids that song from a very young age. They both are building houses. Now the author, Matthew doesn't say, Jesus doesn't say, one of these guys built a house out of bricks and mortar and the other guy built the house out of straw. It's not the three little pigs there. They're both building houses. Nice houses, you can, whatever. But the foundation that they're building them on is the wrong thing. The internally focused person builds his house on the rock. The externally focused person builds his house on the sand. And that's where Jesus is going with this. He says, make sure your identity is external, but internally based, spiritual in nature. Don't just be religious, Jesus says. Be a righteous person. So the question is, are you looking at life as an internal person or an external person? Are you living your life in such a way that you're doing these things that Jesus is telling us to do? Are we not laying up for ourselves treasures in heaven? Are we not focused on who I am the most? Are we not just trying to be law keepers? Are we not being people who are overly critical of other people? And if we're doing those things to the best of our ability, then we're doing pretty good. But if there's something that we need to work on, then that's what he's saying. You've got time to work on it. You've got time to fix these things. And he didn't say you just keep on trucking along. You keep on living your life he says you got to fix them, though. And if there's anyone here this evening who has an issue that they need to deal with, then repentance is necessary of those things. And if it's something that you can do on your own, then do it. And just really, really try to make those changes. But if it's something that we can help you with in any